Man. All right, tonight we are in the Gospel of John and in chapter 8. And last week we were talking about the controversy at the Feast of Tabernacles in chapter 7, and of course that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So tonight we're going to be looking here at chapter 8. Now as we look at chapter 8, why we are going to see that the point of time where Jesus is in Jesus' life. We put this chart up here that we've done all the time because the only way that we can measure the life of Christ to know whether he preached for 20 years or 3 years, of which he did, was by the Passovers or the feast that we find here, and especially the Passovers, that there was 3 Passovers. Now then, we have these 3 Passovers in this way, and as we begin to look at it here, last week in chapter 7, why we saw that Jesus was down at Jerusalem during the Feast of the Tabernacles, and that things took place there. And again in chapter 8, well, things are going to take place here at this same place now. Now, as we look in chapter 8, if you see in verse, it'd be down, in chapter 8 and verse 1. He starts out, it says, "But Jesus went into the Mount of Olives. And then in the next morning, he came back over to the tabernacle." Now, I put this picture up here to kind of give you an idea that all these controversies are taking place in the tabernacle, in the temple grounds. Now, here it is, kind of a picture to kind of give you what it is. Here it is. I'm standing on the temple grounds when I take this picture and looking over at the Mount of Olives. Now, if you were to shoot a rifle over there, of course it's one distance, but if you go down and then go up the hill, it would be another distance. But to kind of give you the idea that if you were to shoot a rifle or if a bird were to fly over there to the top of that hill, why, he wouldn't be going much farther than a little over a quarter of a mile, I guess. Somewhere between a quarter of a mile and a half a mile is where we go. And you walk down that hill, and then you walk back up the hill in there. Why, it's not a very long walk that you have there. And if you see that tall building at the very beginning right in here, it's not the one. See the tall building right in here? Right in here is the Garden of Gethsemane. So Jesus would be going over there, and then he would be coming back. That's in here. Here's another. I somehow or another didn't save this. I had another picture in there that gave you a little bit better picture of this. How do you like that? I made a mistake. It's probably Steve's fault. I'm not sure yet. I'll have to think about that a little bit. That's in here. But now, he starts out here in chapter 8, and it says, "But Jesus went into the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again unto the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them." So he would go over there at night, he would come back over here, and he'd teach them during the day. Now, as we start out here in the first 11 verses, we're going to have this story about this woman that is caught in the act of adultery. Now, we're going to go through this very rapidly in here because it's a pretty simple situation. And we're not going to get bogged down in a lot of details and doctrinal things. But just to let you know, here it is, I'll put up the scriptures. In Deuteronomy 22:22, we're told that if somebody is caught in the act of adultery, by both parties, the man and the woman, are to be put to death. Now, they have caught this woman in the act of adultery. And so they're bringing her to Jesus to ask Jesus what to do about her. Now, it's very obvious that they don't care about this woman. They don't care what you're going to do about it. They're just trying to catch Jesus. And they think they have something that is pretty solid. They'll be able to catch him now. And remember, how badly is it that they're wanting to kill him at this point? They went through that last week. They've already set it up. They're going to try to kill him. Now, either way Jesus answers this, he's in trouble. And they're ready to go and ready to be able to pin him down to take his life. So they came, and verse 3, "And the scribes and the Pharisees bring a woman taken in adultery, and having set her in the midst, they say unto him, Teacher, this woman hath been taken in adultery in the very act. In other words, we've seen this. There's witnesses there. Now, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such. Now, what sayest thou? What sayest thou of her? Now, they said this, trying him or tempting him, that they might have somewhat to accuse him. So they came now, and they asked her this. All right, now, Jesus, we caught her in the very act. Moses, up here in the scripture, says she's to be stoned to death. Now, what do you say? What are they going to do if Moses says, no, we don't want to stone this woman? He's in trouble, isn't he? He is saying, no, we're not going to obey Moses. Now, what law was Jesus living under? He was living under the law of Moses at that time. See, he hadn't died yet, hadn't taken it out of the way. And so they then are going to go, oh boy, here it is. He said we're to disobey Moses. Moses is not right. Moses is not truthful. And on what grounds, on what law, what would they use to kill him? It would be blasphemy, of which they finally end up trying to use anyway in order to kill him. In other words, Moses is not telling the truth. We don't obey Moses. So he's in trouble that way. Now, on the other hand, if he says, go ahead and stone her. Now, does he have any legal right to make that decision? Does he have any legal right to give them the permission to kill this woman? He doesn't have any more legal right to do that than I would have if I walked up on a scene. Let's suppose there was somebody out here who had committed murder over here next door. They'd killed this person. And I walk up and the people turn around and say, what do you think, Lowell? We saw this guy shoot this person. Now, what do you do when a person is guilty of just plain murder? I say, well, just put him to death. Go ahead and put him to death. What would happen to me? And what would happen to them who put him to death? We live under the American law, and we have to go through American law. Now, what law did they live under? Who would come down on Jesus? It was Rome, see? And Rome had to issue all of the death orders. The Jews didn't have the ability or the right to do this. So if Jesus said, go ahead and stone her, then they're going to come back and they're going to say, now you're in violation of Rome. Here it is that you've come and you're trying to take charge and you're trying to set aside Caesar. You're trying to become the ruler, the king. You're even claiming to be the Son of God. You're taking all this upon you. And so they'll turn then to Caesar. Now, did they use this later on, this same argument, trying to show that he was guilty of treason? So this is what they're trying to get him to do. So if Jesus says, yes, go ahead, or no, don't kill her, he violates Moses' law. If he said, yes, do kill her, then he violates the Roman law. So it says that he stooped down and began to write on the ground with his finger. I don't know how many things have been written about this. What was he writing? No idea. Why was he writing? No idea. How long did he write in the sand? No idea. Most people think it's just something to show that he's really not interested in this situation. I'm not interested in that. It's kind of like if I walked over next door and the people said, Lowell, what shall we do? Shall we kill this person? I might just turn around and look and say, walk over to Steve and say, Steve, what did you do today? And somebody would say, well, he just walked over and talked to somebody. Jesus just bent down and wrote on the ground. In other words, it's a way of saying, I'm not involved in this situation. So they're there, and it said in verse 7, but when they continued asking him, they just kept on. They kept on. Okay, give us an answer. What's it going to be? Then he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him cast the stone upon her. Now, that's kind of a shocking statement, the way that he said it to them. He that is without sin, let him cast the first stone. Now, this is generally taken all out of context, the way that we use it today. And that is saying nobody should say anything about somebody because you can't say somebody has done something if you've ever committed a sin yourself. That's not the point that he's getting at. So what is he getting at? All right, the thing that he's getting at is he's telling them, let's do exactly what Moses said. I'm going to tell you, if you want to obey Moses, I'm on your side. Let's do exactly what Moses said. Now, there's more to it than just killing a person in adultery. Here it is. We have Moses already said, one witness shall not rise up against a man for any iniquity. So you can't do that. And in verse 16, if an unrighteous witness rises up against any man to testify against him, that is, you have to have two witnesses, and those witnesses have to be righteous. They can't be unrighteous witnesses. Now, what Jesus is saying is, okay, now, if this is what you want to do, then we've got to have the witnesses, and they have to be righteous witnesses, and so it has to be somebody who's not guilty of this same thing. In other words, I guess, let's take this O.J. Simpson thing that has just come around. They have witnesses to him in there doing this robbery. What kind of witnesses do they have? What did you hear all the time about that? What kind of witnesses? They were all criminals. They were all robbers. They were all notorious for stealing. And so people looking and say, well, what kind of witnesses are they? See, and here it is, you're trying to get them. What kind of witnesses are they? And that's what will be in court when that comes up then this next year. What kind of witnesses are they? All right, it has to be a righteous witness. Has to be somebody that's actually seen them, and somebody, of course, that has a reputation that they can condemn this thing. They're not involved in it. Now, this should kind of give you an idea of how rampant that adultery was at that time, because there's nobody that's going to step up and say, I am a righteous person. I can step up and I can say, I am not guilty, involved in such things as this, and I saw it. And then what else did that witness have to do? You remember what the witnesses had to do? They had to be the first ones to cast the stone. And so I'm going to put that woman down there, and then you two, whoever it is, who actually saw this, you're going to be the first ones that take the stone and bash it into her head. See? Now, does that put a different perspective on this thing? In other words, is that kind of a serious situation, see, that you've got? And so he said, go ahead, but if you're going to put her to death, then you've got to do it the way Moses said to do it. Well, that's another point. They didn't bring the man. Now, you ask why? About the only thing that I can think of the reason they didn't bring him. Now, by the way, was he supposed to be put to death also? Yeah. Does this show that they were really interested in justice when they didn't bring him? They only brought the woman? See? No. It's another indication. This is not a matter of trying to really get justice done. See? This is a matter of trying to trap him. Now, after he told them that, then he said, he stooped it down again and then began writing back on the ground. And when they heard it, they went out one by one, beginning from the eldest even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman where she was in the midst. So he just went back to writing. Everybody turned around. Well, I don't want to be the witness that has to do this. I don't want my life exposed. I don't want to have to be the one that uses the rock on her first and so forth. So they turned around and went away. Now, Jesus upheld the law of Moses, didn't he? He said, do it exactly the way Moses said to do it. So now the only two of them are there then. And Jesus lifted up himself and said unto her, Woman, where are they? Did no man condemn thee? And she said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said, Neither do I condemn thee. Go thy way, from henceforth sin no more. Now, as we look at this thing, I want us to note here that he didn't condemn her legally. Now, that's what it's talking about. Now, he did condemn her morally, but he didn't condemn her legally. So oftentimes, this passage again is taken, that Jesus said, Go thy way, neither do I condemn thee. In other words, you committed adultery, I'm not going to hold you responsible for that. I'm not going to condemn you for that. That's not what Jesus is doing. When Jesus got back up, he asked her, Did any man condemn you? What was he talking about? Was he talking about legal condemnation? Or was he talking about telling her she was in sin? See? When they all turned around and walked away, none of them were willing to condemn her legally. Jesus said, Neither do I condemn you. In other words, I'm not going to condemn you legally either. In fact, if Jesus had have condemned her and said, Okay, if they didn't, I'm going to, did he have the right to do that? No. He was not a witness to that. Now, don't come back and say he was divine and he knew all things. I understand all of that, that he could do whatever he wanted to do in those realms, and he would have been right. But had he condemned her as a Jew without being a witness to this and put her to death, then he would have been guilty of murder, you see, in the eyes of the Jews and the eyes of the Romans. So he's talking here about legal condemnation. Then what was it that he told her? What was the last words he told her? Now, I don't condemn you, but sin no more. In other words, you are guilty of sin. That's not what she's after. She's just after saving her own life. So Jesus did condemn her morally, but he didn't condemn her legally then. Okay, now, as we continue on then, in verse 12. Now, he's going to go back and he's going to get in another conversation with the Jews. Remember last week the confrontation that we had and how it went back and forth here? And remember I pointed out that as you read this, it's so easy to read it, and you just read it in a nice, soft voice, and it just happened like this and this and this. But that's not the way these arguments get in here, is it? When people start condemning one another, they start yelling at one another. This is a real confrontation. So let's note it. Now we're going to try to finish the rest of the chapter tonight, back and forth in this, rather than to break it down and try to make each point that might be made in some particular way. So, verse 12. Again, therefore, Jesus spake unto them, saying, so he got up, he said, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in the darkness, but shall have the light of light. Now, wait just a minute. Look at what Jesus is doing. Now, Jesus had escaped this massive confrontation that they'd had of trying to catch him in here. Then when he gets up, did he wipe his brow and say, phew, that was a close one, and then go back over to Mount of Olives again? No. He said something that provoked the argument again. Jesus is not going to let this thing drop. He goes out in the middle of these people that are out there and said, I am the light of the world, and tells them then that you can have the light of life. 13. The Pharisees therefore said unto him, Thou bearest witness of thyself, and thy witness is not true. So their answer is, you're up here telling about the witness of yourself. Your witness would not be true. Now, by the way, if you're going to have witnesses to determine a truth, how many witnesses do you have to have? You have to have 2 or more witnesses. Jesus here is just one. And they say, and you're bearing witness to yourself. So they're saying, who are you? You're up here telling us this, and you're the only one that's saying it, and your witness is not true. Right? Because you've got to have more witnesses than that. 14. Jesus answered and said unto them, even if I bear witness of myself, my witness is true, for I know whence I came, and I know whither I go. But ye know not whence I came, or whither I go. So now Jesus comes back to them. Oh, yes, it is. Yes, if I'm the only one that bears witness of it, my witness is still true. Because I know where I came from, I know where I'm going, and you people don't know where I came from, and you don't know where I'm going. Now, do you suppose that in this confrontation that he was kind of talking like I'm talking now? Or was he saying, oh, my witness is true because I know where I came from and I know where I'm going. And you don't know where I came from and you don't know where I'm going, so I'm telling the truth. No, this thing is a big argument that's going back and forth here. He goes ahead and he says, 15, you judge after the flesh. I judge no man. Here's your problem. You're looking at this thing from a fleshly viewpoint. The only way that you can judge me is from a fleshly viewpoint. And that is true. Because the only way that you can judge anything is from your own experiences. And your own experiences are just on this earth. None of us in here could make a judgment about spiritual things here. And this is what he's saying. So you don't know what you're talking about. He said, yea, and if I judge. Now, if I do judge in here, he said, and if I judge, my judgment is true, for I am not alone, but I am the Father that sent me. So I'm not the only one that's witnessing and saying that I am who I am. There's 2 witnesses. I'm a witness, and the Father that sent me is also a witness. In 17, yea, in your law it is written that the witness of 2 men is true. And I am he that beareth witness of myself, and the Father that sent me beareth witness of me. So Jesus said, even in your law, that's the law of Moses. Why, if you have 2 witnesses, that's how you determine truth. And I'm telling you, and my Father is telling you. Now, last week we talked about it, and I don't want to repeat things too often, but how many times have they had testimony borne to them out of heaven from God that He is the Christ? As you look at all those things that they had, you could even go back to His birth, couldn't you? You could go back to His birth, and you could look back there at those wise men that came over, and you could look at the shepherds, and you could look at Herod, and you move on down. And when He was baptized, what happened to the Jews when He was around them? What did they hear? This voice out of heaven, this is my Son. What about John the Baptist? Did John the Baptist bear witness? Yeah, he bore witness, see? So Jesus has challenged them all along that you have testimony. If you really wanted to know, you could know who I am, see? Is what He's saying. And here He's throwing it back in their face again. Verse 19, they said therefore unto Him, where is thy Father? Jesus answered, you know neither me nor my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father also. So now Jesus has brought up His Father as one that's witness. Who is your Father? Jesus said, you don't know Him. You don't even know me. If you knew me, you'd know my Father. Again, showing that close relationship that they have to the Father. Verse 20, these words spake He in the treasury as He taught in the temple, and no man took Him because His hour was not yet come. So He was out there on that patio, like I showed you there to start with, out where they had these treasury boxes, and this is where this confrontation took place. But now, there is a great confrontation. Now, I want to again keep your mind on this. who started this confrontation? This particular one, see? Jesus is starting it. Now, if you say, well, who started this whole uproar? Now, I'm not saying who is guilty.